A coalition of civil liberties groups welcomes the federal government's commitment to fighting hate-based violence, racism and white supremacy, but it argues that listing groups as terrorist entities is the wrong approach and will eventually encourage more hate. Tim McSorley is the national coordinator of the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, and as you can see, he joins me now. Mr. McSorley, thanks for taking time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, let's the government has made new additions now, 13 new groups to its list of terrorist organizations. Why do you believe it's taking the wrong approach to fighting these groups and what they stand for?
Right. Well, our coalition since 2001, when Canada first introduced the Anti-Terrorism Act, has been very critical and called for the repeal of many of Canada's anti-terrorism laws, including the terrorist entities list, because they violate some fundamental precepts of due process, access to justice, and the fundamental rights of Canadians. So we think it's incredibly important that the government made this move today to signal that it's taking the threat from white supremacist and hate groups seriously. It's an urgent threat that needs to be addressed. But by using laws that can undermine the rights of people in Canada and people around the world, and that also is based on what we would describe as a discretionary and possibly politicized process, that going forward, we could see more problems down the road than what they're hoping to address right now.
Right. I mean, how do you get people, in the arguments you make, how do you get people past, that emotional bar that says, look, you hear the names of these groups, you hear what they stand for, and all you want to do is say, okay, let's find a way to restrict them, to shut them down. How do you convince them that they need to think beyond that?
Well, I think one of the things that hasn't been part of this debate is that there are parts of the criminal code that already exist that can be used to go after groups like the Proud Boys and other groups that engage in violent and hate-based activity. And the government could also move forward with enacting or modifying current laws on the books to create a possible listing process that would protect fundamental rights as well. We're not against saying that this is a group that commits violent crimes and we need to take action against them. The issue is that the listing process as it stands right now is a secretive process that allows for the use of secret evidence, so that if you're put on the list, you're not able to challenge it fully afterwards when you take it to court. And so those are the problems that we're talking about. And the issue is that those kinds of problems also seep into other parts of Canadian law. So if we justify it for a terrorist entities list, it's also justified for other pieces of national security and anti-terrorism laws.
How does a name on that list, those added to the list today and those that are already on the list, how does a name on that list potentially perpetuate the racism and hate instead of preventing it?
Well, our problem is that it legitimizes the list itself. So up until today, only 2 of 60 groups that are on the list were white supremacist groups. Today we see 4 more white supremacist groups added, but 9 more groups that are tied to groups in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia. And so our problem is that for the last 20 years, people have pointed to the terrorist entities list to say, see, the only problem of violence and the real problem of terrorism only comes from these groups and not from white supremacist groups, not from violent hate groups. And so our concern is that this is a blip on the map, that we have a government right now that is taking it seriously, but after the next election, another government could easily use it to further entrench this idea that it's only groups that are tied to certain parts of the world or to certain religions that are a problem, or that could use this opening in the list to add groups that today we would never think of as terrorist groups. So, for example, there are some on the right who, opportunistically call anti-fascist and Black Lives Matter activists or Indigenous activists extremists and even terrorists. And so we're concerned that by legitimizing this listing process down the road, that's where we'll see the harm is with another government that maybe is more opportunistic or doesn't share the politics of this government.
All right, Tim McSorley, good to get your perspective. Thanks for taking time tonight.
Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.